Good.
Will these be confined or restricted to the unconfined areas of the aquifer?
For the most part, the area
The grants?
in the Santa Fe and the Suwannee that we're looking at is in the unconfined area. There's a minimal confining layer if there's any at all. I mean, it's primarily crested zones.
And then you gave us some aerials that had mapping on it from Manatee.
Mm-hmm.
I suspect that is there something going on in that part of the world that you may be concerned about in the future?
Yeah, there's a guy that's cutting over 1,000 acres of timber that says he's going to put it in circle pivot irrigation.
Who is, do you know who that is?
You had to ask. It's a Land and Timber LLC. It used to be, it's a man's children. I'll think of it.
Not
Sorry.
Phil, not Phil Fox.
It is Phil Potts. Sidney died, and it's his
Right.
boys.
Brian.
Yeah. And they formed a LLC. They've got some grazing land in Bell. And that's what the guys who are clearing the land said. They're going to pay him to stump it out, and he's going to apply for water permits. And it's directly for, Terry, for your information, it's directly over the cave system.
Yeah, right. And you know, that brings up one of the concerns we have. You know, from the state. You know, the ability to implement change is slow and dependent on basically voluntary actions. You know, people have to want to do these things. Okay?
Well, what do you mean? And I you know, that brought my, maybe this is a discussion for a different day, so you can stop me in if you think it is. But just take Ms. Long's map that we got the other day, and you look at that cave system. We just said that we'll take that for being, you know, what she says it is. And if you have any kind of direct connection with that system, then I mean you would have some. You could justifiably have some problems real fast. Is that correct? I mean, from the nutrients from that part of the world. What would I mean? I mean that to me is a big issue that if you was to look at that particular piece of property, I just happen to know the area. I don't know much about what all this was going on, but you know, you come to a point where you have property rights of a man want to do what he wants to do with his property that runs contrary to what is viable for the spring for the long term, if that's what it is. What are those? I mean, that is a very narrow focused thing. What is the solutions to that? I mean, do you just do BMPs, or do you go in there and say, you know, we can't, you know, the state or the public can't afford to have this right here, so the only way out of that to make a guy whole is you buy his land.
They didn't want to sell it 10 years ago. The state tried to buy it 10 years ago, and they refused.
I don't know. I mean, but that's a big. I mean, if that's a pretty big piece of pie to cut, to my way of thinking. You know, that we may need to think about. You know, from some of what you said versus maybe an issue that may be coming before us and all that. You know, we might need to have in our mind what our options are in some of these issues, and if you have pieces of property that are directly under these vents that you know of, what are our options? Ann or John or Johnny?
Yeah, John. Yeah, it is.
Well, it is, and I don't mean to, but I think it's something worth some thought, because you got lots of conflicts here that at some point, if that's the issue and there's no question about it, and you're directly over something, I mean, I fly, and I can't just go fly over Tampa International Airport, I mean, I can, but somebody's got to tell me it's okay. You know, so we all have things we have to live by.
That is a big, you touched on a very big issue, sir, and we don't have any answers.
Well, I think, you know, maybe that's something we need to talk about at another workshop, Han, but, you know, we may need to think about these things, and how do we want to handle them if they come before us? You know, what's the pros and cons, what's our options? I mean, I think that it's, I mean, I don't think there's any question that in some of this real karst soils, that if you happen to be in the right location, and you know, you can open up and have a tremendous amount of runoff run right into your vent.
And we will be facing those too, that, and we have to decide what action to take when we face those.
Yeah, and I think it's just something we need to think about in advance and know the pros, the cons, what can we do, what's our options, that we end up having to, because there's going to be landowners that we end up having to make some decisions on, and how that works. And of course, every one of them may be different, but we need to have some concept, I think, in our minds as we go forward with it.
If we can identify these particular areas that are that have vents that might be of areas of particular concern, could we put stipulations on a permit where we would require monitoring wells, figure out what a baseline would be, and the existing numbers before they start their operations, and have a requirement that they couldn't exceed X number of points from the baseline? Something like that.
One of the things that you run into with an issue in an area like the Suwannee Basin as karst is that the health-based groundwater standard is 10 milligrams per liter. Okay. The TMDL is a surface water quality standard for the river at 5 milligrams per liter. That is a big issue because, and you know, I'm now speaking from like just a pure, you know, regulatory viewpoint. However, you know, whatever the water management district does is their own thing. But it's, you know, there's nothing that says, it's very tough to restrict to someone to below 10 if it's a groundwater discharge, and it doesn't impact, you know, it's not a direct impact to the water of the state, which can be proved. But, you know, in a typical situation, that is a difficult process at best. And that's just something to keep in mind. You know, there is a disconnect between, in this basin particularly, because typically in most of the state we're dealing with surface water. You know, like the Hillsborough River, Peace River, those are surface water inputs. Here, you know, it's impacting the groundwater, coming out in the surface water typically through a spring. So, you know, it's a different animal, and it's you know, it's going to require some creative thinking. I'm sure you have the people.
I think there's enough things in the world that we don't know, and we're going to make mistakes about the things that we can't see and we don't know. But if we have a map of a cave system that we know that is a location in which there's a vent directly to springs, I think we need to be very particular about what we do around that. You know, and I'm not suggesting we go out and just be everything, because there's plenty we don't know, and you know, I know we're going to make mistakes, but let's don't make the mistakes where we can make a change, or we can make something different.
Wasn't it at PCS or one phosphate area where they had a big collapse and it turned out to be a huge cavern system below it in their retention basin?
A year and a half or so ago.
Yeah.
I have a question. What you were saying earlier, the dry fertilizer is the most likely to have the runoff and the nutrient impacts on the water body, correct?
That is, yes.
And the fertigation, which is some sort of spray application.
It's a liquid fertilizer applied through the irrigation center pivots.
Has the least amount of potential for.
Has a much less potential at the least, but hate to say the least because I could quite honestly be wrong, but I know it's a significant improvement.
And it would be,
If the deal is you're applying less, because the grower is gonna run his pivot just as much as he needs to. If he's running it correctly, he's not going beyond the root zone, he's not over fertilizing.
right.
So.
Now, I understand the concept, I'm actually laying this as a predicate for my actual question.
You are our attorney.
Man, you
Try.
are.
All right, so that's the less impactful.
Right.
Would be fair to say that our cave divers are the only ones that have done accurate mapping.
Yes, yes.
Would be fair to say that less than 1% of our probable cave systems are mapped.
Is that a good number? Okay.
I'd say less than that.
Yeah.
Okay, less than 1%. So if we were to look at options, and I agree with the chairman, that you look at what you know and you try to adjust for that, and if it's less than 1%, then a cost share on less than 1% would probably be something that would be approachable, and that as cave divers or districts map out further, it gives very incremental cost increase to the district to help implement things that can keep the nutrients down. Now, I know the words cost share and metering have been getting people's hackles up lately. I'm not suggesting it, but if we were to do things like that, what we actually know is small enough right now that be implemented or approached on very, very minuscule scale and then scaled up as we learn more, which evidently we have no program in place to further now
You know,
with divers in it.
I'm glad our counsel walked in the room because I got a question. You know, normally, Tom, we can't approach anything until we have some region to look at it like an application. But, and I'm not beating up on you two, I just happened to see that map that Ms. Long left us the other day. And I didn't know that's what was going on there, and anyway. But we just take that as it is. Would it be, would we be overstepping our bounds to go to that property owner and say, we need to tell you something, this is part of property that has been underground cave mapped. We know that there's fence here. We know that if there's certain things going on here that we could have some issues with. Before you go spend a tremendous amount of money, let's have some conversation about what you're going to do here, and let's work through this to the best that we can come up with. Is that something that's logical, or is that overstepping some legal definition of what we can do?
You're saying before they file a
Yeah, I mean, just, sure, we just see that a guy's out there clearing a piece of property, and we know that there's some underground structure under there that we are concerned about, that maybe he doesn't even know about. I have no idea.
I don't think there's anything wrong with the district approaching that landowner, saying this is our best information is that this is going on under your property, this is a cave system, this is whatever, and we would like to offer, our assistance in working through, a plan or whatever you would like. I don't think there's any problem with that.
I'm just more like to get more proactive up front to try to keep a big issue down than I had, and all of a sudden, some guy spent millions of dollars and then, we said we're in a contest between each other.
Sure. The only thing I might, but the short answer is no, I don't think there's a problem. The only thing I might suggest is that if you would approach that in some methodical way. You wouldn't want it to be, well, we're playing favorites with this part of the district and we've mapped out all their caves and we've given them this advice but hadn't done anything for the other part.